Hey everyone, it's me again, your host of Heroic Studios Gaming, Hero 170, Hero 2020, depending on where you find me. Also Scott, that's my name. Hi, how's it going? You're probably wondering what this video is all about. Well, I decided that as part of the Patreon, I would do a couple of posts throughout the month that would be something that was kind of random, sort of interesting, something that you guys might care about. So this one is what I entitle Scott's book reviews, comic book reviews, or things that made him think of stuff. So basically, what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk about sort of the foundational things in my life, the books that I've read, the comic books that I've looked at or read, movies I've seen that have sort of influenced the way that I've thought of things, so that you might understand where I come from with some of my game design. Like, for example, some of the monsters in Maximum Apocalypse. Where did I come to those ideas? Obviously the board game had a major influence, but also like some of the background stuff, like the zombies work a certain way in the board game, but they work differently in the RPG. There's certain things that they do. So the question is, like, where did I get that sort of inspiration, right? And that I listed, at least in the monster manual for Maximum Apocalypse, where those come from. But right now, as far as Beta Red's concerned, you're not going to see any of that. For Beta Red stuff, it's just going to be like, okay, it's just random cyberpunk type stuff. The Few and the Cursed obviously has a lot of Few and Cursed influences, but there's going to be some like westerns and things that were behind that, both just not for me, but for Felipe and Fabiano as well. So anyway, I thought that this series would be like a little series, not every Tuesday, but every like once a month there might be a post about this kind of stuff. And then I was thinking that I would do other posts for other things, like maybe some about video games, maybe some about just like sneak peeks of things that I'm working on. But for right now, this is the first one. We're calling this Scott's Book Corner. So sit with me now, if you will. Let me put on my these are the sunglasses. Whoops, wrong ones. Put on the academic glasses, not the sunglasses, and we can talk books and shop. Let's have a sip of our certified Smarty Pants coffee. And let's get to work. So today I want to tell you guys about a series of books that I fell in love with. I think I actually have it here with me. The first copy of this series was actually like book number 16 in the series. And it was actually sort of a reprint by the publishing company to sort of revamp or sort of rebuild the fan base. But the series is called Endworld. That's the name of the series, Endworld, by David Robinson. And I actually emailed him today because I was looking up some stuff about him to make sure I had all the information correct, and found out that he might live in Oregon. But he's still working on stuff. He's still around working on things. So I emailed him today to see if he'd be interested in possibly working with us. So there may be some tie-in. We'll see. I mostly just said, hey, I'm a fan, and like, hey, I got this thing going on. Do you want to help? But this is the actual copy that I purchased from a truck stop in like 1996. 95 or 96. When I was with my dad, and my parents were kind of lax on like certain rules. Like this definitely is not a book that a kid should read. There's like a lot of like murdering, and at one point, if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I read it, but if I remember correctly, in Anaheim Run, there's a part where they're torturing somebody for information, and they like pour coffee, like hot scalding water, on his testicles. So this is definitely not a book for kids, but it was a kid. I was like 10 or 11, and my dad was totally letting me read it. It was 11, I guess. But anyway, it's called Endworld. And this isn't what the book looks like. This is actually an Endworld double, which is two of the stories in one. So you can tell that there's sort of short, pulpy things. But I actually have, bam, that's what the series looks like. There's 45 books in the Endworld series, and I have read probably 16 of them, which is a decent amount. I haven't read all of them. But the first like 12, I think, are on Audible, so you can get the Audible version of the first 12, which are like that first row right there. They're definitely on Audible, and then some of the other ones on the second row. But that's basically there's a spin-off series. So basically, there's 45 books. There's 29 in the actual series. There's 20, I think 7 featured here, but there's actually 2 more. There's like a prequel, and then there's like another one that he's made. There's 29 in the series. There are 13 spin-off books, some of which are shown. Man, I ever get that right. Some of which are shown right there. That's the Blade series, which follows the main character. He's the same guy on the cover here. That guy, his name is Blade. And it's a spin-off series following him. And then there's like 3 other stories. Like there's like a collection of short stories or like sort of events that occurred in that world. But David Robinson has worked on other projects too, so this isn't his only thing. He's got all other stuff going on. But this series, the Endworld series, takes place 100 years after the Third World War, or the final nuclear war that kills off all of humanity, and it follows the characters that live in a collective. They're called the family, and they live in a place called the Home, which is up in Michigan. And the whole idea is that Carpenter, who was the founder of the Home, he was a movie director and like fanatic about the sort of post-apocalyptic stuff that might happen. So he built this really complex bunker with his millions of dollars from his movies, and he had this bunker all set up for everybody, and he sort of he grabbed a copy of every book that had ever existed that was pertinent to survival of humanity, and he had stocked it up in the library of the Home, and he had cached a bunch of weapons and food and stuff, like sustainable foods and seeds and things like that, because he was sort of preparing himself for the end of the world. And then it happened. And so he and all the people he invited to come stay at the Home with him ended up there. And 100 years later, those had sort of split off into various different families, essentially. But there's not factions that fight each other out in the Home. The family is one cohesive unit, but they just have enough biodiversity amongst them that they don't have inbreeding, for example. So that's what it is. But it's a well-established place. But the family, initially, at the beginning of the first book, which is called Fox Run, the very beginning of the first book, they legitimately believe they are the only survivors of the Third World War. And so they know it's the Third World War. They're fairly educated because they have such a big library, and they had a structure for schooling children already established by Carpenter and the people that came with him. Because he selected, he invited only certain types of people that he knew would be able to sort of help propagate humanity after the fall of civilization. So anyway, this place, they're well educated, they are well trained, they have various castes. They have a caste system essentially, and so they have warriors like Blade, who's one of the warriors of the group, and they're sort of broken off. They have these 4 teams of 3. They're a team of 3 is the group of warriors, and they defend the Home. But they defend the Home from mostly animals and strange creatures, because there are mutants in this future, obviously, because of the nuclear chaos that occurred. So there are mutants. So the series automatically starts you off with there's these human survivors, and they deal with mutants and weird animal attacks all the time. But they think they're the only survivors until they start to have some biological problems. They start to have this sort of advanced aging issue. So they have decided that they have to go scavenge and see if they can find some medical components that they might need at one of the nearby hospitals and one of the nearby towns near where this compound is, to see if there's anything left and if they might be able to scavenge it. But before they can even do that, they get attacked by someone. They think it's basically some weird people attack them, and they realize that they're maybe not the only survivors, but they don't know how the extent of what the other survivors are. And they end up having to basically, because some of their people get kidnapped, they end up having to go to war with this other group of people. And it just goes from there. So the first 3 books in the series, I've like I said, I've read 16 of them. This one is actually a book. So Anaheim Run, Seattle Run are book 12 and 13. I actually can't remember. I'm going to double check that. Endworld Series, because I actually don't remember which they are. But so just to understand, when I started reading this book, it was literally this book in mid 1990s, and I started halfway into the story. It's 13, so it's books 13 and 14. Books 13 and 14 is what I started with. So I had no foundational understanding of who Blade was, who Hickok was, who Ricky was. I had no idea who these characters were, but they had all these friends, because Anaheim Run. They're having all of the factions that have sort of, because of the family who's sort of been traveling around and sort of bumping into other survivors, they've all the factions of survivors that are around in the world have kind of come to the understanding that there are other factions of survivors. And so the Anaheim Run is somebody calls together a group of the survivors to sort of have a treaty, to sort of create a peace treaty amongst the different factions and sort of create maybe a trade network. And they, of course, are meeting at Disneyland, hence Anaheim Run, right? So they're going to meet at the old the old sort of Disneyland, not inside Disneyland itself, but that area, because there's a lot of hotels and things, to be able to have this sort of treaty, this discussion on like what do we do with other survivors, and that's what this book is about. And then there's like antagonists in the group. There's like this group of survivors who apparently don't want this to happen, and that was not clear to me when I was first reading the series. I was just like, cool, whatever, bad guys do bad things, right? But now that I've read the like several of the foundational books, I understand who that group is now, and I recognize that this is actually like a callback to a much earlier situation in the storyline. So overall, like the story is actually pretty cohesive. For a bit, it feels very much like they're wandering around the wasteland and sort of bumping into other characters. There's whole sections of some of the books where one of the characters is kind of off on his own. He kind of has a mental breakdown after like his like marriage is like a thing in their family because they have to maintain the biodiversity, but they also have to like it has to be like a certain character. So they can't marry their cousin, for example. They get married once. There's no divorce. They have kids. Like that's how it goes. And they have a very sort of Puritan look at like marriage and children in this way, like sex and things like that. And so because of the way that the world is at the time. So the one of the characters is a girlfriend / person he was going to marry. She ends up dying, and he goes off on like this sort of walkabout, this like quest to find himself. And so I think it's like the third and fourth books. He's not really, he's part of it. He's like in the story, but he's not really there. Like he's not with everyone else. He's on his own, and he runs into other factions and deals with other things. And in that case, there's actually a cool scene with like giant bugs. And like it was the thing about like how giant bugs could work in the Maximum Apocalypse universe came out because of like that book. Like they have some bug stuff. But anyway, it's a really good series. I would recommend it if you like pulpy 80s style post-apocalyptic stuff, because to be fair, this was written in the 80s. I think the original publication date for the last couple of books was like 91. So this was written in the 80s. It very much has a feel of like Soviet Union, World War III, Fallout kind of stuff. And so that's the kind of book that it is. If you like those kinds of stories, I would recommend this quite a bit. It is a fun series. It is very much not something that you're going to like walk away from being like enlightened about how to survive the final days of humanity, because that's not the kind of book that it is. But it does have, it is a very interesting sort of look at a civilization that might exist, or a family or cluster, a compound that might exist in the end of the world. So if you play Maximum Apocalypse, if you're interested in my game at all, then you could see how this might be useful information if you wanted to read this for how to make your own sort of campaign group. In fact, when I did the campaign playtesting for Maximum Apocalypse, I actually created the home, which was a cluster of buildings essentially, and there was a whole lot of people there. I think I did like 300, roughly the same amount of people that live in the compound, live in the home for this series. And then like I let the players just be different people, and they weren't the people from the book. I didn't like go that far, but I did like sort of use that as like a foundational thing where there was this compound and there were a bunch of people in it, and they had access to like different things. And then they were, at the very beginning, the very first thing that happened is they were attacked by a group of, mutant survivors. So that's how I started it off. And so the campaign we ran with like this was just sort of like maintaining this compound that they were supposed to be protecting, and it involved like going out into the forests around them, scavenging, things like that. So there was some aspect of this does appear kind of in the Maximum Apocalypse rule set for how to like do groups and tribes and stuff like that. So this is what a community or a tribe would be. This is essentially what I did. The home, if you were looking at Maximum Apocalypse, the home from Endworld and the family is basically a tribe, and then they have like kind of their own like language. They kind of know things more than everyone else, and they have different styles of doing stuff. That's sort of what this is. So that's going to be my review of that. I give it a thumbs up because I only have 2, so I can only give it 2 thumbs up. So I would give it 2 thumbs up but with a caveat that it's not like an intellectual, amazing series like you might find with other stuff. But it is definitely fun. I actually have a whole shelf over here. My wife is like angry about it. I don't own all of the books because I can't. Some of them, strangely, are incredibly collector's items and like really expensive. I think like the 8th one, for example, is like $150 just for the one, right? I'm like, I'm not gonna pay that much money for just one book. I'm not that into it. Like I like it and I do enjoy it, but I'm not like gonna pay $150 for one book. But I have, and some of the first ones are hard to get, as usual with like a lot of series, is the first ones like get sold out, and like when the sort of series gets popular, they're harder to find. So I think I have books starting at book like 9, I think 8 or 9. So I start at like 9, and then it goes through, and obviously I have like my original from '96. You can see that I've read it like a couple of times. Like it's pretty worn. Yeah, so like, I mean, I was reading in the truck with my dad. My dad was a truck driver, and I used to read it in the truck with him, so it also kind of got beat up just because of that. But I have like books like 9 up until I think to the end. Actually, maybe I'm missing the very last one. But I did cheat because they started publishing these as like not they published them as individual books, but then they started publishing them as like doubles, like this one, where they'd put like 2 books in one like binding. And so this is actually 2 books. This is both the Anaheim Run and the Seattle Run, right? So they would put 2 in there. So if you look at my shelf, there is like a lot of them, but it also is not like all individual books. I think I have like basically. So I think it starts with this one. I'll go look at my shelf, but I probably should have before I started recording. But it starts with this one, and then it's like every book is like 2 books. So I have like 14 instead of 28, that kind of thing. But I do have most of the series. Like I said, I'm missing the first ones, and then like the ones that were expensive. So I think I may actually have like book 6. I think book 6 or 7, book 6 and 7. I think, yeah, I do have Citadel Run, yeah, for sure. So I definitely have book 6 and 7, and then I don't have. It's either 8 or 9. One of those 2 is super expensive trying to buy it online, and so I don't have it because like I said, I'm not going to pay that. But then I think, yeah, starting 10. So 10, I do have the double. So I have, or 11, I have the double. So I have the Liberty Houston Run. I do have that one. And then I have Anaheim Run. Yeah. So that's how it starts. So that's how it goes. And so there you go. So that's my review. If you enjoyed that, cool. Let me know. If you want to hear about other stuff, let me know. If this kind of sucked and you hated it, let me know that too. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. And like I said, go read this if you feel like it. All right, that's it.